Okay, Exodus 13. Now, I want to start out with this because this scripture passage here is very important. Exodus 13:16. Everybody take a look at that. Exodus 13 and 16. Actually, let me skip back to 15 and we'll read that because that kind of ties in as well. So this is what it says. Exodus 13:15. And it came about when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go, that the Lord killed every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrificed to the Lord the males, the first offspring of every womb. But every firstborn of my sons I redeemed. Okay, now what that's saying there is that God's saying of you, Israel, this is what I command of you. I command that you give me every firstborn of your flock. Okay? And he had them break their neck, actually, which is a pretty horrific thing to do. I would not want to do that at all. But this was something to them that was very, the firstborn, in other words, if you're a shepherd, when your flock's giving birth, that's money, right? That's money in the bank. That is increase. That's what you're wanting. You're wanting more of that you can get, the better off you are in your trade, in your business. And so what he's saying is, the first one, give it to me. And do it in a way that, to me, would be difficult for me. Probably those guys were a little more hardened and not as sensitive as us Americans are about our little pets, or whatever, if they did wasn't a pet to them. But at any rate, they had to do something kind of difficult as a means of sacrifice and remembrance. See, the whole thing is that you remember. And it's that when you do something like that, you're going to remember that. As often as that would occur, which I guess would be every spring or whenever their flocks would give birth or whatever, it's kind of going to be often enough that, man, that's kind of that's not just a thought, like God is faithful and God did this in Egypt. It's like, okay, this whole this action has gotten all of my being involved, like my spirit, my soul, my body, I'm sacrificing something that's for today, and this is real. Like it makes a mark on the heart, in other words. And the purpose is to remember. And then he says the firstborn, of course, he didn't want us to kill our firstborn children, but he says, give it to me because I want to redeem it. I want to bless you through your firstborn. Okay? So that's a big deal. And then here's the second verse here that's the next big deal for us today. So it shall serve as a sign on your hand. That's verse 16. So it shall serve as a sign on your hand and as phylacteries on your forehead. For with a powerful hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt. Now, what is that? What does that mean? This is basically saying, look, I need you to have a sign on your hand for remembrance, and I need you to have a sign on your forehead for remembrance. Okay, that's the purpose, is to remember. Now, what Jews did with that little bit of information is, because that's all they were told, and we don't really know exactly, God didn't fill in the blanks there, exactly what he meant for them to do to remember. But we do know some things now because of modern science that's very, very interesting. But anyway, what the Jews ended up doing was that they had these tassels that they would wrap around their right hand. And even in other areas, they would put 5 knots. Later in tradition, they would put 5 knots, which represented the 5 books of Moses, which is the Pentateuch, the Torah, and it represented Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and they would wrap it around their fingers and hold those knots and supposedly remember that this is life. This book is life. Okay, so it was all for remembrance, though. Everything is set up here for remembrance sake. All in a Jew's life, all of the holidays that they do, like we do Christmas, all the holidays through a year, they're all very significant. They are remembering something that occurred in the past for the purpose of remembrance again. Okay, so if you got a sign on your forehead, and what they did with that is what this turned into were phylacteries, which were little leather boxes. And it was like the holier you were, you had a bigger box on your forehead. And it turned into, like in Jesus' day, it turned into these phylacteries on their heads that they would hang there, and they had little scriptures in them, certain scriptures, and they had to be written a certain way on a certain piece of paper, and all these restrictions and regulations, as if that really mattered. And they would put them on their forehead right here, and they'd walk around with them so that everybody could see how holy they were. And the bigger phylactery, the more holy, so to speak, is what they thought. And Jesus made comment to it. He's like, you guys have just completely missed the whole point here of what this was all about. It's not about you being a big, holy big shot with your phylactery on your forehead, because that does nothing for you at all. I want your heart. And that's what this is about. And see, so we know today that what God's getting at here, he's actually, if you look into the Hebrew word there, it's talking about putting something on your mind that would split your mind. In other words, if it was a band around here, it would be a remembrance, but it would represent splitting your mind. Splitting your mind so that God could get to the heart. Okay? Because many times we're intimidated by what we see, right? And we judge our lives and our decisions by what we see and what we feel and what we think we know, which would represent our mind getting in the way of what God says, getting to the heart. God says, look, let me split your mind so that I can give you a new heart, and you can think and see with a different way of viewing life, that I'm with you, that I'm going to do this. Okay, so here's the modern interpretation, as we talked about last week. The prefrontal cortex. If you were to remove this section of your skull, what is directly behind it is called the prefrontal cortex. Okay, and there's a couple of different spots there, but the majority of this, from the front of your brain right here, is a very powerful part of who you are. It is your identity. It's what you remember. It's who you think you are. It's all housed right in here. Okay? So what you think and what you do is all housed right in here. It's the part of your brain that plans and that thinks forward. It's the part of your brain that imagines. You know what imagination is? How many of y'all have fears? What are those fears? You ever thought about this? John F. Kennedy said this, his famous words. What is the famous words?
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Exactly, thank you, Colin. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. What was he saying there? Listen, guys, your fears are imagined. Right? That's all they are. Now we have little things out here that they haven't happened yet. So see, we're imagining those things happen. And that is enough to stop the whole shebang, right? We have decided we know what's going to happen. And we're afraid of that imagination. We've already got the movie screens out there. It's been rolling. I'm like, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to cower back away from that. I'm going to do plan B over here, right? And so see, all it is, you're fearing fear itself. It's just an imagined fear. That's all it is. And God, this is the thing I really don't like about God. I like it, but I don't like it. He will force you. If you want to walk with Him, now a lot of people don't. A lot of people just want salvation and they want heaven after this life's over, but they don't walk with Him. If you walk in step with God, like God says, hey, now I want you to go this direction, He will force you. He will force you to face your fears. Those imagined fears. He'll force you to do it. I don't like it, but I'm getting used to it a little bit more than I have in the past. Because I'm realizing, okay, this is the deal. I can die in the desert here, wandering around, going nowhere at the same point, or I can finally step into the things that He's asking me to do, which is to face my fear. And all it is your imagination. It's imagined fears. And that's the whole process, guys. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because it all happens right here. This is part of your brain. And that's what He was saying to the people of Israel. Look, give me your prefrontal cortex. Because I've got to sanctify your imagination with my words. See, because I'm present. And I will speak to you about who you really are. And I'll give you a better picture of a better future that there isn't any fear in it. It's faith. It's God's going to provide. God's going to split the sea, so to speak. God's going to make things move. And I'm going to get to walk with Him into that, into a better life, into a greater impact, into more influence, into doing things that are going to change the people around me. I'm going to change, and the people around me are going to change as I walk with God, as I face my fears. And that's what He's saying, prefrontal cortex, right here. Give me this part of your mind. I've got to have it. Okay? So that's very significant that we make note of that, because the entire, listen guys, from now on in Exodus, what we're seeing is a people that God has called His own. He's saying, you're mine, and you are a peculiar people. In other words, you're not going to be like anybody else on the face of the earth. You're mine, and I'm going to tell you how you are to be, and I'm going to give you a future that only I can give you if you'll walk with me. I'm going to make you a great nation upon this earth. I mean, you're my people. God's saying, I'm the Father, you're my sons and daughters, you're going to look like me if you'll follow me, and you're going to stand out above the whole world. The whole world. And the Jews have done that, guys. In case you know anything about Jewish history, this is a nation that's set apart from everybody else. More Jews have impacted the world than any other nation, significantly, through history. He did something really awesome with them. And now and to add on to that, Christians who have been grafted into that tree. That's what we get to do. He grafts us into that very same family. And He says, I'm going to change the world through you. And Christians have changed the world. And just look at all the history. Look at the great men and women of God and what they've done for the earth. That is God working with a son or daughter, getting their prefrontal cortex to think the way that He thinks, so that they can act the way that He acts, so that they would change the world. And many, many of our brothers and sisters have done that throughout history. From this time in Exodus forward. Remember, it started with Abraham, then it went through that bloodline we're down to Moses now. But that's what He does. That's what He's doing. Now, what the wilderness wandering helps us understand is what happens if we don't walk with Him. Because most of the nation of Israel died in the desert. If y'all can imagine wandering around in a desert for 40 years. Now what that means for us in modern day terms is you just never do make it. You know, it's all a bunch of dead ends. It's all a bunch of failed relationships. It's just a bunch of, you look like the world, you act like the world, you might go to church, but there's really nothing going on in your life. There's nothing different about you. See, you're not stepping into who you are in Christ and what God really wants to do in your life. You're just wandering. Your life really doesn't amount to much of anything. And sadly, many lives are like that. It's not God's desire. But we get to choose, right? See, we get to choose that. We get to choose whether we want to step into it. I'm at the point in my life, 44 years old, where I'm like, okay, I'm seeing that the other side of my life. You know, when I was 15, I thought, I got the whole world ahead of me, all these things, and you think you're never going to die, and your life's going to go on forever, and it feels like you just got all this in front of you. And then all of a sudden, you're 44, and you're like, okie dokie. Even if I'm just really extremely healthy, and nothing catastrophic happens to me, I'm on the backside of this thing all of a sudden. Like I don't have a lot of years left. I don't have a lot of screw around, wander around years left to do with. Right? So you're like, okay, Paul, let's not die wandering. Let's just go ahead and see what it would be like to walk with God. Now, I'm not saying this is easy, guys. It's not. It's real. Facing your fears is no joke. It's real. But it's the only way to move forward with the Lord. It's the only way to become something supernatural. It's the only way to break out of the mold that you see everybody else in around you. And the opportunity is right there for all of us right now. Walk with God. I'll say I'm preaching to myself here. Hope you guys get some of it today. So imagine this. You got a bunch of slaves, right? This is a whole nation full of slaves. Now this is not as easy for us to figure out, although many of us were enslaved to our own imaginations. We are slaves in many ways, not enslaved in the way that they were, but we're enslaved in our mind and our beliefs about who we think we are, aren't you? Y'all think you know what you can do and what you can't do, and you're enslaved to it. See, that's enslavement of the mind. That's what you got to break out of. But the nation of Israel were literally enslaved. That means that, think of this, guys. Think of working in a good 80-hour week. Like some of you guys work. Catherine, you work some, right? Cole, you work quite a bit. Lindsay, you got a job. Some of you guys don't have jobs because you're not supposed to necessarily. Justin, you work. What's the maximum you guys work in a week? I know you don't have all the time to do that with. What's your max?
21.
21 hours? Okay, that's a pretty good load on top of school and everything, right? You guys work anything? 12? Okay, still, I mean, anything above school is you're adding on to a pretty good bit there. Justin, you probably got something similar to that. 15 to 20. Okay, so y'all are putting in some pretty good time. Imagine an 80-hour week. Okay? Holy cow. That's what Elon Musk works. You know, the guy that launched his own shuttle the other day. I don't recommend his lifestyle, but he's a workaholic. But 80-hour weeks, that's a lot of time. Let's imagine you put in that kind of work and you get nothing for it. No paycheck. It's just your life. Slave. Work for me and get nothing. That was their life. Nothing. They would keep them alive. That's all they do with enough food to keep them alive. That's it. The only identity you have is that I'm going to get up tomorrow, I'm going to work for somebody else, and I'm going to get nothing for it. Generations of that. Okay? So you have to imagine, what do they think about life? What do they think about their future? These people have never had to think in terms of resourcefulness, like what can I do for myself? Because it's already been told what they're going to do. They don't have to use the parts of their brain, which will be the prefrontal cortex, about planning. What do you think the slaves' planning, prefrontal cortex planning was about? Well, great-granddaddy did this, and granddaddy did this, and mom and daddy did this. I'm going to do this, and my kids are going to do this, and my grandkids are going to do this. Planning done, right? No planning necessary. Never had to use that part of the brain as a muscle for, let's imagine something awesome. Let's imagine that I'm going to go here, and I'm going to become that, and I'm going to do this. None of that. It's like an unused muscle. You know what happens when you don't use your muscles? It's called atrophy. I've been through this cycle so many times in my life. I'll work out, get big and strong and puffed up, and then something will happen and I'll stop going to the gym. Like last time, my shoulder started hurting so bad I couldn't do anything. I was like, forget it. Can't do anything. Instead of staying up with it, kind of running on the treadmill or doing what I could, I just forget it. A couple months later, I'm bloated. All of my muscles just shriveled back down to little mushy things. And then I'll get back on a good kick and I'll work that muscle back up. See, you got to work it, and you got to keep working it to keep it strong. The brain is a muscle. You know that? It's just like a muscle. So you got the prefrontal cortex has got to be trained. Now they've come out of slavery, right? They got a slavery mind though. Their prefrontal cortex has one word on it written: slave. Okay? Unused. Totally atrophied muscle, although it does have potential. They can start using it. And now they're going to have to start using it. And that's what the whole desert thing is all about, guys. The whole desert experience for God's children is that they learn how to use their prefrontal cortex. God is saying you have a new identity. You're not slaves anymore. Notice, no Egyptians with whips are around any longer. You're not a slave anymore. You are my children. And we are going from here to there, which is a promise called the land of Israel. An awesome land. Right? Now listen guys, the land of Israel this time, the Bible uses terms like it's a land that flows with milk and honey. We're talking about abundance. Like good, fertile land. Beautiful, usable, awesome land. Like the choicest land in all of the Middle East. That's where He's taking them. But they got to get through the desert first. Not only that, there's giants in that land right now. And what God's job is to get a people who think differently so that they can get to the edge of that land and see the giants and go, it's all right, we'll take them. Here's the problem. Slaves don't think that way, right? When the slaves got up to that territory and looked over and saw the giants, what do you think the slaves thought about that? What do you think they imagined? Did they imagine going down and doing all their kung fu moves? Yeah! Did y'all like that? Yeah! Zach, you're lucky my shoe didn't come off and hit you. I had to flex my foot to keep it from flying. But what do you think they imagined? Exactly. They're like, okay, we just got checked out of this land of enslavement over here. These people are like 4 times their size, so they're envisioning, we're going to walk down there. This guy's going to bend me over and spank me and put me in his yard and say, mow my lawn, slave. And I'm going to do it because I'm a slave, right? See, God had to get slaves to stop thinking like slaves and start thinking like unbeatable warriors. Now that's a job because He's got to work with people. People who get to choose how they're going to think. Do y'all know you get to choose how you're going to think about you and everything else? Gosh, that's the one part I'm like, God, could you just take my chooser and just remove it? And just, I think if you would make me a robot, I would be a better person. That way you can tell me that you can just put it in here. Like Paul is a mighty warrior. He's a robot warrior, but he's a warrior. At least he's not a slave, right? But He won't do that for me. I'm like, God, just come on, just make me a robot, please. Robot me. Make me an awesome robot. He's like, no, you get to choose. That's the whole deal, buddy. I'm made in your image. And I'm not a robot. And I don't make robots. I make people who have the same capacity I do, which means choice. You get to choose. It's your life, buddy. You can believe me. Now, that's in the cards. Believe me about what I say about you. You don't have to be a slave. You're my son. That's the truth. Man, I struggle with that, though. I just want to think I'm still a slave. I'm just on my way to more slavery. See, that's imagination, right? That's an imagined future. Y'all see this? What do you think about your future, guys? And listen, it doesn't need to be a false future, because listen, when I was your age, even though I was a drug addict, a blooming drug addict at the time, I wouldn't even call myself a drug addict yet, because I was a blooming drug addict. Like I was practicing it. I was going to become really good at it, but was just working with it at that point, you know. Drinking and drugs was mostly every weekend, and then it started, towards my senior year, I started doing it in the week. Like sometimes I'd go to school drunk, just on good days, you know. When I was really ready to have some fun. Go to school drunk, go to my baseball games high. Started creeping into my life on more of a daily basis. But I still thought in my little pea brain that I was going to just waltz out of high school and walk straight into a Division I program and just be the greatest baseball player ever. That's what my little pea brain had thought of. Like somehow, some way, in some whimmy type of a way, that I had some talent that was just going to lift me into glory. When I'm practicing nothing to get me there. Now, what do you do when you practice? You practice disciplines. And now I'm not saying I didn't have the talent. I did have some. I'm not going to over-exaggerate my talent, because who knows. But the talent that I did have, if I would have honed it and disciplined myself daily and learned how to go to school, how to give myself to every grade, to every teacher, to absorb what they were giving me, and then to work towards a goal, like, okay, I got a test now, I've got to set aside time now to work, to prepare myself to get this information in here so that I can stand up and deliver on that test and say, yep, see, that's what I do. When I have a task, I might feel like going doing this and doing that, but I discipline myself to study. Because that's what sons do. That's what people of resource do. They practice that. And then after school, I might go get into a really good workout and get as strong as I can, because, hey, you're becoming something. You're consistently working out, you're getting stronger, you're honing muscle, you're working those things. And then I might go into the batting cage and I might put in my time and effort there, and I get the skills, and then I have a good solid character and I'm working all these things, then I'm going to have doors open up for me to go step into play college ball somewhere at a significant level. But I was doing none of that. Right? So that was a false imagination that I had because I was practicing something else. It's like walking this direction and thinking that you're ending up somewhere over there. You're not. You're going this direction. I was going towards absolute slavery. Drug addiction, sex addiction, just good time addiction. My whole life revolved around that. That's all I was doing. See, that's where I was going. Slavery. In other words, if I had imagined that I was going to be a Division I athlete, then I would have to turn my life around, which is repentance, by the way. Change directions. And then I would start lining up with the things that are going to get me there. Listen, guys, if you have a desire to go to Johnson City, then when you step out of this building and start walking, it's going to be that direction, not Abingdon. You don't want to be trying to walk toward Johnson City when you're actually walking towards Abingdon, right? See how that's two different directions? That's the way your life is. So what you want to do is line up with what does God's future for me look like? What does that look like? That's what the training is all about. So let's take a look at this real quick. Now y'all remember this. Abrahamic covenant. Let's cover this real quick. What was in the Abrahamic covenant? 3 things. Catherine, you can answer. Catherine's on it. She knows this. Anybody else? Abrahamic covenant. What's in it? God promised Abraham something. Don't say it, Catherine. What did he promise Abraham? Excellent. What else? You guys really don't know this?
Now say it out loud for one second.
Nation.
Excellent. Nation and seed. Okay. You guys got to let this get in. We've been repeating this over and over and over. See, these are the promises. And Abraham can't give him these things to himself. He can't give himself a nation. And yet, at this point in the story, we find that he has one. Now, he's dead and gone, but it's through this line of Abraham that God has created himself a nation. There's a bunch of them. He's setting them apart now to become peculiar, just like him. And now he's showing them who they are. Okay? And the seed, we know, comes as Christ 1,500 years later. Right here. John 6:30. We're going to try to touch on that real quick. So again, we're just walking out this thing. God has promised it. Now he's doing it. He set them free from slavery. Moses is leading them into the wilderness. Now, where are they going right now? Where are they on the way to? Canaan, which is the land, right? That's the promised land. Another way to say it is that it's the land promised. Right? Simple, isn't it? Lindsay. Land, that's in the promised list. That's what they're on the way to. But on the way to land, there's training. How many of y'all know if you wanted to be a Navy SEAL, what's in between? Let's say this goal. Let's say you're deciding you're going to be a Navy SEAL. That's your dream. Okay? Lots of guys my age, because Top Gun came out, they decided they wanted to be a fighter pilot. Like 3 of my friends. And they all crashed and burned, man. They didn't quite make it. But what would be in between you today and a Navy SEAL that's going and, say, SEAL Team 6 is killing Osama bin Laden? What's in the way? What's in between?
We have to join the Navy first.
And then what are they going to do to you? Train you to death, aren't they? That's what they do, man. If you want to get to the highest of levels, training will never stop. That's all they do. I've read the books about some of these guys, and it's like, okay, that's a life I'm not sure I would want. Just training upon training upon training upon training. That's what they do. So, if we've got a job, this is the same thing with the nation of Israel. We're going to take a land that's filled with giants. So what do they got to do? They got to be trained. That's what the whole wilderness is. I know I'm repeating this, but it's worth repeating. The whole time in the wilderness is training. Training to be combat ready. Now, it's not that God's putting them through SEAL training. It's not as much physicality as it is what they think about themselves and the fact they've got God with them, right? They've got God with them. He's going to do this through them as they step to the plate. Now, they need to be ready to be good with the sword as well and do some other things, but hey, they're not counting on their own ability. They're counting on God's ability. But you got to believe it. You got to trust in that. You get trained into that. You got to get the prefrontal cortex going here. So here's what happens. First thing. Here we go. Let's see, 14, 15. Even in 15, right after they sing the Song of Moses, right? The Red Sea just split and all that stuff happens and God kills all the Egyptians and they just got done singing the song, the worship song about God's glory and power. And in verse 22 here, the first thing they start to do, they get off in the wilderness. 3 days later, they're crying out and grumbling, complaining about not having any water, which is a legitimate thing to complain about, I guess, if you're going to complain. Hey, we're in a desert, we're going to die. What are we doing here? Y'all remember their sarcasm a little bit before? He's like, this is some pretty funny sarcasm they say. Were there not enough graves in Egypt that you had to lead us out here to kill us? I mean, that's just sarcasm, right? So they're going back into this slavery mentality. You've led us this far to kill us. Why? Why would you do that? Instead of them imagining that God would do something miraculous and that somehow they get water, what are they imagining? They have an imagination now. It's being used, right? And in their imagination, they're seeing their little children take their last dry breath. And dust comes out, right? And then they're not far behind them. Like their last breath will be just singing. So that's what they're imagining, right? And that's not good. So they're going, why are you going to do this to us? We can see the future. There's sand coming out of my baby's mouth as he dies. Right? They're not saying all that, but they're seeing it. Because that's what we do with our minds. God's like, okay, let me remind you. 10 plagues, Red Sea. You know, we're coming into a pattern here. I'm going to deliver. Give me your prefrontal cortex, you slaves, so that I can give you a mind of a son. Somebody believes in me like I'm good and I want to do good for you and I'm going to do good for you and I got more than you can even imagine on the way. Your puny little minds can't even imagine what I see and what I know. But just give me your imagination with faith. Let me sanctify it. And so he delivers. He gives them water. So in the very next thing here, chapter 16, which is supposed to be today, which I've spent the whole time talking about everything but that. But now they need food, right? They're out in the desert. They're like, and this is where they start thinking like slaves again. They start going, oh, the slavery. Remember the pots of meat? After we were beaten all day, we got to come home and there was a pot of meat to eat. Remember that? Oh, that meat. As their backs hurt and they had no life whatsoever. That's what they started thinking of. You know, I did that myself after I got delivered from drugs and alcohol and all that life, you know. As I've been being trained, these many years, trained to get my mind changed. I don't know how many times I have gone here. And this is crazy, because you would think, why would you think that way? I know exactly why you think that way. Because I've done it. I will think, I remember when I did drugs, it felt good. And drinking. Man, I'd go out, have all kinds of fun. I had all these friends, I had this social life, and we had a great time. And your mind just goes back to all the highlights, like all the fun time. And then the Holy Spirit will say, Paul, remember when you wanted to blow your brains out because you were miserable? You remember that? Oh yeah, it wasn't so good, was it? Yeah, that's right. Listen guys, I'm serious. This is how real it is. You will think back, and the enemy will have you think that it was so good. It's not good. It's not good at all. But that's part of the battle. That's what these guys went through. God says, look, Paul, if you want a social life, all that's going to come. But see, we got to get through the desert, buddy. I got to change your mind before you're actually going to get some of the good that I have for you. Your problem is your own mind, son. And see, we got to get through the desert so we can get into the good stuff. We got to get into the promised land in your thinking and who you are. And you're not going to enjoy some of these things until you get there, but it's worth it. Just keep going forward. Right? So this is transformation in their thinking. You got to get the prefrontal cortex. Right. You got to start imagining things properly. So here's the test. The test is what you remember. Man, we want to grumble, don't we? Grumble and complain about how bad it is. Oh, how terrible it is. Oh, how awful it is. Y'all know when we talk about training, if you were going to go into boot camp in the military, how many of y'all think some of those guys in that 8-week period of time, they think about, oh, my bed at home, and how I'd have to sleep in until noon, and then get up and eat whatever I wanted, and watch my favorite show, and then text all my friends. But you're a loser. Do you like being a loser? Anybody like that? You don't, whether you realize it or not. See, but in boot camp, see, we're becoming somebody. We're getting disciplined. We're becoming a new person. Now, is it fun? No. But is it worth it? Yes. Do you want to go back to what you once were? Maybe, for a moment, until you think about the future you're going to have that's going to be much better, and you're going to like yourself because you have some self-respect. You got some discipline in your life. So it's normal to think, man, I want out of this. But it's also wisdom to stick with it and to grow and to move forward, to move out of the past and move into the future. So here's the test. There's no food. How are we going to get food? God has to come through for us. Right? Man, those appetites. Y'all remember the appetites? You got appetites we have to deal with. The appetites are the things that we feel like doing in the moment. Y'all know what I mean? I feel like playing Xbox. I don't feel that, but I'm trying to get into your all's world a little bit. I feel like texting my friends. I feel like, what do y'all feel like doing? I feel like eating an entire pizza. I feel like, what are some things y'all feel? They're human things that you want to do. You want to waste your time, right? Y'all know, I want to watch YouTube for hours. Kittens with lightsabers. Just whatever. Just mindless entertainment. Y'all ever feel those things? Okay, what you have to do. Now, some of that's okay. You put that in the right priority, proper priority, that's fine. But when it starts to dominate your time, then you're not going anywhere. And you have to discipline yourself, okay? Many of you guys, I got a test coming up on this day, but I feel like watching kittens with lightsabers instead. Right? I'm just going to spend my time doing that instead of studying. The Galatians 5:22 is a list of the fruits of the Spirit that a son of God will have. The last one is self-control. Y'all know that discipline is the root. It's the root quality that all good things spring out of. You can't get anywhere without it. Y'all know rich and successful people. You know why they become rich and successful? Because they have learned to subdue their momentary impulses for a future blessing. They've learned to do what they got to do when they got to do it. And then they reap the benefits of it later. That's what all money management's all about, right? That, let's just have a typical day. Like, okay, today I'm going to go spend $10 at McDonald's. I can eat that much food. I can eat $15, $20 worth of McDonald's food, actually. Right? Because I have a big stomach. I can eat all that up. Or, I'm not saying that's wrong, that's okay, but if you do that every single day, here's the thing. You take that money instead. Let's say you even fast. You don't eat anything. You take that $15 and you put it in a money market. Okay, so you forsake your impulse of the day. And you say, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take that money and I'm going to put it in a money market. See how you do that? You say no to the momentary impulse. Even to eat. We know you got to eat, but you don't have to eat $15 worth in a sitting. Right?
It makes us happy.
Yeah. We have to forget we got McDonald's owners over
I thought
here.
you were giving me thumbs up. And you were going to tell me let's go to it.
Exactly. You like me.
Hey, man.
But I'm disciplined now. I'm doing it much less. See, so you take that and you put it into a money market. Many, many years later, Like it doesn't have to be McDonald's. I'm just using that as an example. You know, it would be undisciplined of me to eat $15 worth in a sitting, right? That's not necessary. You could live off of a lot less. They help you out with that. The dollar menu and whatnot, right? See, so what you're doing is you're saying no to your own impulses in the moment, and you're putting this aside and getting it somewhere that's going to help you in the future. Now, you don't get the pleasure of it right now, but see, you're putting the pleasure in the future in a multiplied, compounded fashion. And that's what life does for you. That's the way that it works if you learn to discipline yourself. Today, you get the life that you'd like to have tomorrow. And that's what God's saying, look, I want you to learn how to live in wisdom. So with manna here, gosh, I'm getting through the whole thing. With manna, what ends up happening is God says, hey, I'm going to deliver you guys. Don't worry about your needs. I'll take care of you. And He lets manna fall from the sky. And they said, what is this stuff? It's manna. It fell from the sky. It was with the dew. When the dew dried up, this flaky stuff was left over. And God said, look, get enough for each day. Okay, get enough for each day. On the 6th day, I'll give you you can get a double portion for the 7th day, which is a day of rest. And I want you to work, and I want you to gather on that day. And I'll take care of you guys. See, I'm with you. You're not a slave anymore. I'm going to provide. Your sons. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to give you what you need as you go through this training process of changing your prefrontal cortex and what you imagine your future to be like. I'm with you, and I'm good. Go through this discipline. Control your appetites. Remember about appetites. Appetites have one time. Now. Appetites have one desire. More. Now and more. And it's never satisfied. If you go that direction, you're going to be a big guy laying on a couch with no future. No discipline. Right? Just following every impulse that shoots into your little tiny pea brain. Oh, I feel like eating. Let's eat. See, you're a slave. Oh, I feel like doing drugs. Let's do drugs. You know, you can do that. We live in America, right? You can do that. And you'll be miserable. You hate yourself. So let's jump forward real quick since I'm getting to the end here. So remember, guys, the bread fell from heaven, typologically speaking, in 1500 BC. That's the manna, the bread from heaven, falling from the sky, right? Now, remember typology and foreshadowing? Because that is a type of the future. If we skip 1500 years into the future, the cross comes, the bread from heaven comes, the real deal comes. John 6:30. Let's read that. John 6:30 says this. This is Jesus speaking. They said therefore to him, no, this is not Jesus, but he'll speak in a moment. They said therefore to him, what then do you do for a sign? That we may see and believe you. What work do you perform? Our fathers ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written. He gave them bread out of heaven. Y'all hear that? They're referencing this story. They're saying, look, Jesus, if you're so big and bad and awesome, our fathers ate manna that fell from heaven. God gave them manna. Jesus responds here. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, it is not Moses who's given you the bread out of heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. Y'all hear that? He's saying, look, Moses didn't give you the bread. My Father gave you the bread. And He's still my Father, and He's still giving you bread. And He goes on to say, I am the bread. So He goes on to say, I am the bread of life in verse 35. I am that bread, people. Jesus is the bread come down from heaven. He who comes to me shall not hunger. He who believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe. All the Father gives me shall come to me, and the one who comes to me I will certainly not cast out. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of Him who sent me. And this is the will of Him who sent me, that all that He has given me, I lose nothing, but raise it up on the last day. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who beholds the Son and believes in Him may have eternal life, and I myself will raise him up on the last day. What's Jesus saying? He's referencing Himself to Moses in the wilderness. Now, this is one of those typologies that make us go, how did Moses know that? How did Moses know that Jesus would come and say, look, it's me again, the bread come down from heaven? What do we do in the Lord's Prayer? The Lord's Supper. We break the what? We break the bread, which symbolizes the body of Jesus, right? And then we eat it in remembrance. There's that word again. What you remember is who you are. What you remember is who you are, what you're going to do. Now, it might be wrong. God might view you differently, but what you remember is how you're going to act. See, everything set up in the Word of God is about remembering. It's about getting the prefrontal cortex to imagine a better life for you. Imagine the life that God has for you. See, so if we're looking at the supernaturalness of the Word of God right here, Moses puts in actually it's not a story. This really happened, and he just recorded it. God says, look, I'm going to send the bread come down from heaven in this time, in 1500 BC, so that I can send down the true bread from heaven in this time, and y'all know who He is. See how that works? It's not a made-up story. It actually happened. God, who knows the end from the beginning, put it in there so that when the bread come down from heaven, the true bread come down from heaven would come. He could stand upon that platform. Y'all remember that? Saying, this is me. God is my Father, and I am the Son of God, and I've come down so that my broken life would give you supernatural bread, sustenance, change, power, super added to natural so that you become supernatural, world changers. Listen, guys, every single day you can eat the bread of heaven in a relationship with God. And through experiential knowledge, He will change your prefrontal cortex so that you think like a son of God instead of a slave. The imagination that God has for you. In fact, the Bible says in Ephesians 3:20, I think. Got it written down. Ephesians 3:20, I say, he says, I want to bless you abundantly beyond what you can even imagine. See, God's view of your life is beyond even your imagination. But He says, start lining your imagination up with good instead of bad. Good instead of fear. Good things instead of bad things. Imagine me blessing you and lifting you and seeing you through. Imagine seas splitting in front of you because I'm with you. Imagine that. That's what a son or daughter of God does. All right.